Hey all, Scott here. You know, there's this neat thing that happens whenever I talk about game compilations. My house catches on fire. It's happened once before, it's practically a tradition at this point, but I'm laser focused on safety this time. I have a fire extinguisher on standby and loads of safe thoughts up here. Before I start, I should probably take all my flammables off the floor. As much as I love shelves full of games, sometimes you just need something a bit simpler. Oh my god, yeah, it's great to have compilations! Collections of games all in one package, and we've already taken a look at game compilations before. Specifically Sonic Mega Collection, Mega Collection Plus, Mario All-Stars, Mario All-Stars 25th Anniversary Edition, Kirby's Dream Collection, Atari Anthology, Activision Anthology, Namco Museum on Xbox, Namco Museum 50th Anniversary, Namco Museum on Switch, Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, Dreamcast Collection, Sega Classics Collection, SNK Arcade Classics Volume 1, Metal Slug Anthology, Mega Man Anniversary Collection, Mega Man Legacy Collection, Legacy Collection 2, but not Sonic Gems Collection, so we should talk about that before things get weird. Sega has always been quick to make as many of their older games playable on as many platforms as possible. If they even think you're about to say, I could really go for Vector Man 2 right now, they will stop at nothing to make sure you question why you wanted to play Vector Man 2 in the first place. My favorite compilation Sega ever put out was Sonic Mega Collection for the GameCube. It's my favorite for incredibly shallow reasons. I grew up with this game, and while I had prior experience with Sonic 1 and 2 on the actual Sega Genesis, the presentation of this compilation was so amazing. They had a plethora of extra content, and the menus along with their music was just so good. Plus, they had Sonic 3D Blast playable here. Sure, it's a bad game, but that proves how brave they really were. Mega Collection focused on Sonic games for the Sega Genesis. You had all the main classic titles available here, alongside some spin-offs. But there was one game that made total sense to include that was missing: The Eighth Sin. Sonic CD, the game for the Sega CD add-on for the Sega Genesis. It was still a classic mainline Sonic title, and it was considered one of the greatest Sonic games of all time. Only two of these statements are correct. Sonic CD's opening and ending cutscenes were available in Sonic Mega Collection, and the game itself was planned to be included, but why do that when you can make an entirely separate compilation? Sonic Gems Collection, released a few years after Mega Collection, exclusively on the GameCube here in North America, while a PS2 release was totally a thing in Europe and Japan. The concept behind Sonic Gems Collection was obscure Sonic classics, and that is so cool! Not only would Sonic CD become readily playable on dear god anything but a Sega CD or the old PC release, but it would be available alongside oddball games from the franchise's history. What, stuff like Sonic Schoolhouse, Sonic Pocket Adventure, Sonic Eraser, Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, the educational Sonic games for the Sega Pico, the prototype for the cancelled Sonic Extreme, Knuckles Chaotix, Sonic Crackers? No. 3 games are the headliners here: Sonic CD, Sonic R, and Sonic the Fighters, a treasure chest of rare gems. Has Sega ever heard of peer reviews? Listen, sure, these are all far more obscure than your typical everyday Sonic game, especially in 2005 when this collection was released, but this just feels like they wanted a reason to release Sonic CD on modern platforms, threw in a couple extra games to call it a collection, and boom, disappointment. This was such a missed opportunity. Like, sure, Sonic R and Sonic the Fighters are fun, somewhat obscure releases, but the concept of a collection going over a franchise's more unknown releases and for it to only focus on 3 measly games when there is so much more to pull from, it's disappointing. A lot of the obscure Sonic games I listed originally actually were planned for the collection at one point, but they decided against them due to technical difficulties or for just no reason at all. Gems Collection also includes a handful of Sonic games for the Game Gear. Whoa. It's weird they don't count these as actual additions to the collection and just label them as extras. What, were people that pissed at Sega calling Game Gear games real games? They're bonuses! They're bonuses! Vector Man 1 and 2 are playable. Yep, some real Sonic gems there. But over in Japan and Europe, they got more games. They got Bonanza Brothers and Streets of Rage 1, 2, and 3, and never have I been more ashamed of living in Ohio. This compilation pulls a lot from Sonic Mega Collection Plus, specifically the menus, and there's not much in terms of extras that are really all too groundbreaking. I always wanted this collection as a kid. I mean, I had Mega Collection, of course I wanted Gems Collection as well, I was only human. For years this game eluded me. I never saw it in person, never saw it for sale, new or used, and one day I said, I can't live like this. I clicked a certain button on eBay and Sonic Gems Collection was finally mine. Of course, ever since I bought this, I see this game for sale everywhere, and that always happens to me. A game I never see for sale ever. When I finally find it and buy it, it starts appearing fucking everywhere. Calling all games, don't pull a Sonic Gems Collection, that bugs me. Getting to play this compilation was a cool feeling after all this time, but the games included are mostly polarizing. If you love one of the games in this pack, it's likely you won't like a good chunk of the rest. And the fact they could have gone so much farther with the idea of rare gems, and all they did was throw a couple of Game Gear games in here and some Sonic games that were so hard to find ways to play at the time that you may or may not like. I'm not a fan of this compilation. It's a fine way to play these games, it's just always going to feel like it was an excuse to re-release Sonic CD and nothing more. Well, we're 0 for 1 with Sonic compilations so far, let's rinse our mouth out with Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn. Sonic Jam was one of the first major Sonic compilations and was basically a way for Sega to get something Sonic related out on the Saturn. There wasn't a ton of Sonic games on the system, so Jam was released to satiate the lust. This is a collection of Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. You can attach Knuckles to the other games. You have new normal and easy modes, which alter stage layouts or just shortens the overall game experience by removing levels, I don't know. The games themselves play amazingly. They are near perfect recreations of the original Genesis games, and of course, it has Sonic World. This was a preview of what a 3D Sonic game could be. It's nothing special, but it's incredibly charming and it's kind of easy to just get lost in this small little hub world. It's such a cool yet often forgotten piece of Sonic's 3D history, or history in general. The Sonic World hub has small little missions to complete within it and is how we access the bonus content like commercials and artwork. This was and honestly still is an incredible compilation. You can tell they put so much work into this release. It just makes me wish this hub world and commercials were included in something like Sonic Gems Collection, but thank God it has Vector Man 2. Let's finish up the Sega talk with one more collection, Sega Genesis Classics on the PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. You know, when this was announced, I was pretty into it. I loved Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection on 360 and PS3, and this seemed like it was that again. Popping it in, and that's kind of right. So there are a good handful more games in Genesis Classics compared to Ultimate Genesis Collection, but oddly enough, some are missing, like the Echo the Dolphin games and Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. Now, Sonic 3 and Knuckles have been in legal limbo for a while, so Sega just completely gave up on those games. The Echo games are out of missions though, but whatever, I only play those like once a week. I'm fine popping the old collection in for them. Overall, this is a fun way to be introduced to these games or relive memories of them. There are tons included, they run fine enough, you get different filters and borders, you can turn off the borders, and a lot of cool features are included, like rewinding the games, plus online multiplayer for some titles. But Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection just had more oomph to it. It felt like there was more passion and professionalism behind it. All the extras, unlockables, and overall style made this a much better experience. Sega Genesis Classics, with its 3D user interface, omitted games, and a lack of attention to detail, make it feel amateurish and cheap. Like, instead of using the actual game box arts, they just plastered the game logos on stock Genesis boxes. Like, come on. The 90s room setup is kinda cool, but it looks so dated visually. It's obvious they weren't given much of a budget for this, and while I can appreciate they wanted to do something more than just a simple menu, at that point, don't even try. You didn't have the budget for a nice looking room. That's okay, just go for a simple and clean 2D menu like Ultimate Genesis did. There are some nice features like changing filters and borders, something Ultimate Genesis Collection didn't have, but I'll always take it in comparison because it just felt like a more substantial package. It had cool unlockables and the borders were sort of annoying, yeah, but they made unique ones for every game. That's kinda cool and annoying. Here, it's just basic ones and there's nothing to unlock, no bonus features, and the menu's ugly. Plus all the things you can change with it, like the time of day, why? Comparing this to Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection's interface is the definition of less is more. Also, the Nintendo Switch version's missing the Wonder Boy games. Well, if we want to actually be happy, we can try something else, so why not the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition on the GameCube? This is a weird one. This disc was available through GameCube console bundles, Nintendo Power subscriptions, loyalty programs. This was fundamentally a carrot on a stick for Nintendo fans. If you buy a GameCube, we'll give you something to do with it. The box isn't formatted like normal GameCube box art with the logo in the top right corner, and the name itself is sort of bizarre, just The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. Why not name it something like The Legend of Zelda Collection? Popping it in, we have access to the original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. Yep, the two NES and N64 games. No Link to the Past on Super Nintendo, no Link's Awakening on Game Boy, no Oracle of Seasons and Ages on Game Boy Color. Why not include these games as well? I mean, you have to draw the line at some point with adding games, but this is like a sandwich with no meat without Link to the Past. I mean, all the games are fully playable here. It may not be the best way to play them, considering Majora's Mask has a severe case of not running well, but if you only had a GameCube and you had this disc, you got a ton of value here. These are 3 of the most beloved games of all time in Zelda 2. We even get a playable 20-minute demo of the Wind Waker, plus 2 videos, and that's it. I mean, I can't really complain, but it's just kind of a bizarre release. So Zelda Collector's Edition is too weird for me. If this game was a human, I'd f***ing run. I think I want to go back to old reliable, the Namco Museums. Namco Museum Remix on the Wii is how I realized I wasn't deaf, but I may be soon. This game's volume is intensely high. I mean, it makes sense. They really want you to hear as many little details in these games as you can. Only 9 games are here, and the selection is really lackluster and strange. No Pac-Man, Galaga, Miss Pac-Man, Rally X, nothing like that, but thank for Pac and Pal. I mean, I like Pac-Mania and Dig Dug. Gapless is the criminally underlooked sequel to Galaga, and it's amazing. Xevious and Mappy are solid, but a Namco Museum feels really incomplete without Galaga and Pac-Man. Instead of these games, we have 5 remix titles. What are these? Wii minigames that aren't interesting. Namco Museum Remix feels more like a Wii minigame collection along the lines of Wii Play than a Namco Museum. And why are these remix minigames based on arcade games not playable in this collection? Why is there Rally X Remix but no Rally X? Namco later re-released Remix as Namco Museum Megamix with double the arcade titles and 1 more remix minigame, and this is more like it. See, Megamix has a legitimately good lineup of arcade games. It no longer feels like the quality of the lineup is lessened by the focus on remix minigames. This is a solid collection. This is Namco Museum Remix. But to truly appreciate a Namco Museum title, we have to look at more of them. So here we go, Namco Museum on Game Boy Advance. Just a simple collection including Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxian, Dig Dug, and Pole Position. No frills, no reason in hell to play this game now, but for the time, this was great. They adjusted the games to work on the Game Boy Advance screen quite well, giving you options to play all zoomed in or with the full arcade screen in view. With Ms. Pac-Man, Galaga, and Dig Dug, in my opinion, those are the must-play Namco arcade classics, and having them portably was icing on the cake. But I didn't have this game as a kid. I had this game, Pac-Man Collection. 4 Pac-Men, the original Pac-Man, the puzzle game Pac-Attack, the isometric game Pac-Mania, and Pac-Man Arrangement, the game where Kinky the Ghost joins the fray. Arrangement's a fun spin on typical Pac-Man with tons of gimmicks added. I remember playing this game for hours on end as a kid. Pac-Mania was a nice change of pace from regular Pac-Man, and Pac-Attack I can appreciate because it's a really clever way of taking the ideas and mechanics of Pac-Man and turning them into a Tetris-like puzzle game. However, I had no damn clue what I was doing in this game as a kid. I just thought the way the blocks dropped was kind of satisfying, so I would play this from time to time and fail immediately. I have nostalgia for this collection, but my god, looking back, I would have so preferred Namco Museum on GBA instead. I mean, Pac-Man Collection has some neat games, but at the end of the day, fucking Pac-Man's fucking Pac-Man. 3 of these games are basically the same thing. Namco Museum had Ms. Pac-Man, which is the best version of Pac-Man, plus a variety of other games I really loved. Plus, what the hell kind of a box art is this? I've always had a soft spot for the arcade compilations. I mean, without them, a lot of these arcade games, I'd have to buy a small portion of land to own just one cabinet. It's nice to have them readily available in a collection playable on a game console. Midway Arcade Treasures was a series of games released for the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, and each one has a different age rating. There's something for everybody here. Arcade Treasures 1 focuses on the old school arcade games, stuff from 1980 to 1990. We got Clacks and more here. It's a decent lineup: Smash TV, Paperboy Gauntlet, Rampage, Joust, Root Beer Tapper. There are 24 games here, which is a great amount. However, I'd be more into this if the menu wasn't atrocious. What the hell am I looking at here? So they use vague symbols and just show gameplay in the center to portray what you're selecting? Why not use text? What if I don't know what this gameplay is representing? All this screams early 2000s. The formatting on the menus and extras isn't that great, but hey, they tried. I never made a Midway Arcade Treasures game, so I'm not one to talk. At least they got another whack at this with Midway Arcade Treasures 2. Would you believe a game with a cover like this is rated M? That's because this compilation focuses on later arcade games when intestines were really in. Stuff like Mortal Kombat 2 and 3 and Narc. Okay, this rating makes sense. This menu. Oh my god, this menu is so much better. Plus, the extras get a huge upgrade. In Arcade Treasures 1, they were hell-bent on using Comic Sans and defining the word format. Oh man, let's check out interviews for Root Beer Tapper. Oh, well, Arcade Treasures 3 focuses on racing titles, which means it definitely lacks a lot of the variety we had in 1 and 2. Though we do have a lot more modern stuff. It's pretty cool to have Hydro Thunder and San Francisco Rush here. Though my standards of cool may be lower because I've been staring at compilations of mostly games like this. Well, let's see what extra features this collection has. Well, outside of this collection having one extra and it being a trailer for this is a decent collection. All of these are pretty good, though I think 2 is the most well-rounded. It has the best bonus material and the games are great. But weirdly enough, this is a re-release of Midway Arcade Treasures 1. It originally looked like this, but after 2 came out, they reprinted the cover to look more in line with later releases, renaming it as Midway Arcade Treasures 1. I always find it weird when the first installment of something has the number 1 in it, like they know another one's gonna happen. I'm in hell. Capcom Classics Collection Volume 1, a collection of random Capcom arcade games. Street Fighter 2, Final Fight, Ghosts and Goblins. It's fine. It didn't necessarily blow me away, but it's not bad. I think I just prefer a lot of Capcom's home console stuff. Their arcade games I'm not as attached to, so I'd rather talk about something I have stronger feelings towards, like Data East Arcade Classics on the Wii. Yeah, I like this game solely because it is $60 used. I paid that, and what did I get? Side Pocket? The best game in this collection by far is the arcade version of Burger Time. Other than that, I mean, what? Bad Dudes? Caveman Ninja? that's about it in terms of well-known games, and you couldn't hear it, but I used quotation marks on well-known. It's a decently put together collection, but Data East is just not the neatest video game company in my opinion. They're one of the first to license their games out to damn near anybody. That's why you see their games on those cheap mini consoles and whatnot. And all those cheap mini consoles really advertise the hell out of the fact they got the Data East to put their games on them. Nobody gives a shit about Data East games, I'm sorry. At least Taito has more of a recognizable legacy with Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble. Taito Legends focuses on just that and then some. See, this compilation has some classic games and fun presentation. Data East Arcade Classics was kind of the bare minimum. Sure, they had artwork as bonuses, but the way they presented it was just kind of boring. Taito Legends makes history fun! 3D models of the arcade machines, full video interviews with developers, essays on Taito, artwork, they have it all. Including Space Invaders Part 2. The first game was such a success, let's see how they up the ante! This is a great collection, lots of variety and just gaming history goodness. It's well organized and put together. Taito Legends is what I want out of an arcade game compilation. There is a second edition released later and I don't have that, but again, I never trust a game compilation that already knows it'll get a sequel. Taito Legends is the gold standard. They waited and made another one when they found it necessary. But what if a sequel comes out the same day as the first volume? This was stupid. Mega Man X Legacy Collection and Legacy Collection 2 both released simultaneously on July 24th, 2018. Legacy Collection 1 focused on Mega Man X 1, 2, 3, and 4, while Legacy Collection 2 focused on 5, 6, 7, and 8. You know, these are both great collections. Sure, Legacy Collection 2 is obviously the stinkier one of the bunch, but both are well laid out. Great filter and border options, museum features with videos, a brand new mode where you fight 2 bosses at once, great stuff. But let's talk about the fact that these are 2 separate games. Was this just so there would be parity between the classic Mega Man Legacy Collection games and the X Legacy Collection games? I mean, the classics got 2 volumes, X surely has 2 as well. Was it because they didn't want to put everything in one package for a higher price and instead just made them available separately for $20 so then more people wouldn't have to think about buying at the very least one of them? Was it so then they could just copy and paste most of the museum extras from one collection over to the other, so you just end up asking, why did I buy both? Why did I buy both? I'll tell you why. See, originally I was just gonna pick up X Legacy Collection 1 because that was the one with the good games. I bought it on the Nintendo eShop and realized I accidentally bought 2 by mistake, so I have both, good for me. You know what else had a similar release strategy? Atari Flashback Classics on the PS4 and Xbox One. They released them via 2 volumes at the same time, and I had the same question as many others. What, you couldn't fit all these Atari games on one disc? They're Atari games, they're minuscule, they're the size of my respect for these collections. I separate them via 2 volumes, and a third one released later at that. Thankfully, all these volumes were compiled into one for the Nintendo Switch release. This is how things should be. This is Atari Flashback Classics on the Nintendo Switch. 150 games here, and I only care about like 5 of them. I mean, this is the most extensive Atari collection yet, and if you want to get into this era in gaming, here you go. This is the compilation to get because it really sells how lame a lot of the games were back then. I can appreciate the simplicity of these classic titles, but even the biggest Atari head on the planet will say, yeah, most of these games are trash. But 150 games available, and most of them being lame, that's honestly a pretty spot-on portrayal of Atari. Even games I love like Breakout, that game only works well with the original paddle controller. For some reason, they never put effort into tweaking the controls to be fluid with a standard thumbstick. It's always too sensitive or not sensitive enough. There's not a ton more available to play around with here than just a bunch of Atari games. I'd say this is worth the money in terms of quantity of games alone, but I think Atari Anthology was the better compilation. I don't know of any games Atari Anthology didn't have that this one added that makes a big difference. Plus the bonuses, Atari Anthology had way cooler ones. Flashback Classics just has the manuals and some achievements. Might as well try out some other Atari collections I happen to have. I've owned these for quite a while but never played them. Retro Atari and the Atari Greatest Hits collections for the Nintendo DS. Retro Atari is all about taking these old school games and making them cool again. Hopefully. This game's more focused on recreating these classic games with touch controls in mind. And I have to say, Pong and Breakout work far better with a touchscreen than a standard controller. Now, Asteroids and Tempest are a nightmare with a stylus, what are you gonna do? Atari Greatest Hits is more of a standard collection with a pretty meaty selection. Just a bunch of Atari games, but they actually give us a ton of options to play around with. All the standard Atari 2600 switches and new controls for the arcade games. Plus there's a trivia game and even a recreation of Army Battle Zone, a simulator Atari created for the military to train with. In Volume 2, we have video interviews and a whole Atari 400 computer emulator. That is so neat! Sure, video files aren't the greatest on the DS, but back then I would have geeked out over this. It was so cool when DS games played video. I love how they give you the option to use the stylus for some of these games, as it just works so well. And there's something oddly endearing about playing these games on a DS screen. I really like these releases. As a big fan, I should go to their website, atari.com/. One. Well, let's keep the good times rolling with Intellivision lives on the Xbox. I mean, Intellivision was one of the biggest competitors of the Atari 2600. Surely their compilation will be on par with something like the Atari Anthology. What the f am I doing? The Intellivision had a controller with a keypad, meaning half the time we have to bring it up on screen to use it, and half of these games are two-player only. Cool. They organize them oddly too. I have to jump around between different genres. There's some unreleased stuff and some extras, which is nice, but I hate to say it, I don't think I'm that into the Intellivision. I'm 22 and said what? But something I can really get behind is obviously Rare Replay on the Xbox One. Initially released as a $30 collection of 30 of Rare's titles. They're most known for the Donkey Kong Country games, Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Battletoads. They have had quite a history, and Rare Replay is all about celebrating that. Minus Donkey Kong. Yeah, obviously working with Nintendo and them being bought by Microsoft will do that to you, but this is one of the greatest values in all of gaming. Of course, not all of these games are winners. I mean, they go all the way back to the early 80s. But it brings so much variety this way. It includes NES games and Xbox 360 games. That's so cool. It's so fun to skim through these titles and watch all the interviews. I think this was the collection to popularize the rewind feature on retro games, which, don't tell the purists, is a nice little option. This is an excellent release, a perfect way to celebrate Rare's 30th anniversary, and a no-brainer for any Xbox One owner. In fact, it's really the only reason I am an Xbox One owner. This is my favorite game on the console. But we can't end on a high note. Remember when I said Sega Genesis Classics was the last Sega collection we'd look at today? Guess what I forgot? SEGA Smashback on the Game Boy Advance. It includes Golden Axe. Okay. Sonic Spinball. Why? And Echo the Dolphin. No kidding? Not only is this a very odd group of friends at a house party, but imagine if those friends ran like shit on a Game Boy Advance. This is bad. Why only 3 games? And at that, why these 3 games? And at that, why do they run so poorly? Okay, I lied. We need to salvage this all. Donkey Kong Classics on the NES. It's Donkey Kong. I did it. I talked about game compilations without committing arson. I'm cured. I'm more than just my addiction. I will never cause another fire ever again. Time to celebrate.